Donald Trump is in all-out panic mode right now, and it is no surprise. He is facing increased opposition from Republicans in the Senate to his agenda that is on the verge of falling apart, and at the same time, his scandal over a war no one wanted to get into is causing him problems. It is the reason we saw him melt down at 3 a.m. last night on Truth Social. We're going to get into it all, but first, I want to start with Senator Raphael Warnock, who is making the case against Donald Trump's legislation that's on the verge of collapse.
And so in a very real sense, lives are on the line. We are in a moral moment because something else is on the line. I submit that the character of the country is on the line. In a real sense, the question tonight is, who are we? Not who do we tell ourselves we are, but who are we really? What and who do we care about? What kind of nation are we? And what kind of people do we want to be? Who matters? And who doesn't? Who do we think is dispensable? In no place is the answer to that question clearer than in a nation's budget. I submit that a budget is not just a fiscal document. A budget is a moral document. Show me your budget and I'll show you who you think matters and who doesn't. And if this awful budget were an EKG, it would suggest that our nation has a heart problem and is in need of moral surgery.
So Donald Trump has a lot to be worried about, of course, but it all starts with this big, ugly bag of garbage bill, which Democrats have been hammering for days on end now. And it's the reason last night we saw Republicans push their vote-a-rama because they are still worried, they are still concerned if they have the votes. Because even they know, as Josh Hawley, who's somehow voting for this bill, admitted, it is catastrophic. It will do huge damage to not just those being kicked off their health care by the number of millions, but rural hospitals, community health centers across the country. So Donald Trump, of course, has that to worry about, but he also has to worry about his illegal, unjustifiable, and incredibly unpopular war and how he's struggling to fix that. And Chris Coons said something on Fox when addressing this very issue that has Trump losing it in a Truth Social meltdown.
So Brett Stevens, writing about this over at the New York Times, called this decision to strike, he called it courageous. He writes this: Trump's responsibility was to deny Iran's leaders the capabilities that would have allowed them the chance to change their minds at will to devastating effect. Amid uncertainty, the president acted before it was too late. It is the essence of statesmanship. The IAEA made it clear that Iran was in violation of a number of agreements. You've talked about the fact that they were enriching far beyond what you would use for civilian non-weapons use. So in your opinion, how much longer should we have waited?
So Shannon, the key thing we don't know now is what's happened to the 900 pounds of highly enriched uranium. It's entirely possible that Iran moved it outside these sites. It would fit in the back of an F-150 pickup truck. And there are open source pictures of trucks pulling up to two of these facilities and leaving afterwards. So,
and the White House says they think that that was, in their assessment, concrete being poured or things to make that a tougher target to penetrate. But
and that may be. But what I think the administration has to do next is come forward to Congress with the most complete picture our intelligence community can give us of what happened, of what's going to happen next, and of what their strategy is. I'll just note that President Trump, by press accounts, is now moving towards negotiation and offering Iran a deal that looks somewhat similar to the Iran deal that was offered by Obama. Tens of billions of dollars of incentives and reduced sanctions in exchange for abandoning their nuclear program.
Whenever you invoke President Obama's name, you know Donald Trump is about to lose his mind. And I think Chris Coons kind of knew what he was doing saying that. Also, good on the senator for going on Fox. He does that a lot, and we need more of that from Democrats. And we need more of that because it drives Donald Trump crazy, as we can clearly see right here. Trump lashes out at phony Democratic Senator Chris Coons as he denies Iran talks. Donald Trump flatly denied any talks with Iran as lashed out at Senator Chris Coons while brushing off speculation that his administration might be opening diplomatic back channels following U.S. strikes on Iranian nuclear facilities. Coons appeared on Fox News Sunday to claim that Trump was moving towards negotiation, offering a deal that looks somewhat similar to Iran's deal offered by former President Barack Obama. The deal, formerly known as the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, was abandoned by Trump during his first term in 2018. In an early Monday Truth Social post, Trump denied Coons' claim outright, slammed Obama's nuclear deal with Iran, and doubled down on claims that his attacks on the country had totally obliterated their nuclear facilities. Trump wrote on Truth Social at 2:56 a.m., "Tell phony Democrat Senator Chris Coons that I am not offering Iran anything, unlike Obama, who paid them billions under the stupid Road to Nuclear Weapon JCPOA, which would now be expired, nor am I talking to them since we obliterated their nuclear facilities." Yeah, but the thing is, Donald Trump is lying, and we know Donald Trump to be lying based off of Donald Trump's own intelligence and opposition within his own party, which we are seeing a lot of lately, unsurprisingly, because things are falling apart for Donald Trump, and some of the obviously loudest opposition is coming from the Senate, where we saw Tom Tillis last night rip into Donald Trump, and you were going to want to watch every second of this.
The state-directed payments and the cuts scheduled in this bill, there's a reduction of state-directed payments, and then there's the reduction of the provider tax. They can't find a hole in my estimate. So what they told me is that, yeah, it's rough, but North Carolina's used the system. They're going to have to make it work. All right. So what do I tell 663,000 people in 2 years or 3 years when President Trump breaks his promise by pushing them off of Medicaid because the funding's not there anymore, guys? I think in the White House, senators advising the president are not telling him that the effect of this bill is to break a promise. And you know the last time I saw a promise broken around health care, with respect to my friends on the other side of the aisle, it's when somebody said, if you like your health care, you can keep it. If you like your doctor, you can keep it. We found out that wasn't true. That made me the second Republican Speaker of the House since the Civil War, ladies and gentlemen, because we betrayed the promise to the American people. 2 years later, 3 years later, it actually made me a U.S. Senator because in 2010, it had just been proposed. And just anticipation of what was going to happen was enough to have a sea change election that swept Republicans into the majority for the second time in 100 years. Now, Republicans are about to make a mistake on health care and betraying a promise. It is inescapable that this bill in its current form will betray the very promise that Donald J. Trump made in the Oval Office or in the cabinet room when I was there with finance, where he said we can go after waste, fraud, and abuse on any programs. Now, those amateurs that are advising him, not Dr. Oz, I'm talking about White House healthcare experts, refused to tell him that those instructions that were to eliminate waste, fraud, and abuse all of a sudden eliminates a government program that's called the provider tax. We have morphed a legal construct that admittedly has been abused and should be eliminated into waste, fraud, and abuse. Money laundering. Read the code. Look at how long it's been there. I was Speaker of the House. I refused to do it. When I left North Carolina, I said, we're not going to do a provider tax. I left it at 2.5%. Now it's 6%. Mistake on the part of the leadership. And frankly, I know my friends are probably going to think I'm a little bit crazy here, but I actually passed a law that made it illegal to expand Medicaid. Why did I do that? Because I was convinced someday we would be here. And I would have rather found a way to get more people on Medicaid at the standard FMAP than having this 90-10 match and watching it disappear and taking away desperately needed health care. So, Mr. President, over the course of the evening, I may look for an opportunity to speak again. But I'm telling the president that you have been misinformed. You supporting the Senate mark will hurt people who are eligible and qualified for Medicaid. I love the work requirement. I love the other reforms in this bill. They are necessary, and I appreciate the leadership of the House for putting it in there. In fact, I like the work of the House so much that I wouldn't be having to do this speech if we simply started with the House mark. I've talked with my colleagues in North Carolina. I know that we can do that, and I believe that we can make sure that we do not break the promise of Donald J. Trump that he's made to the people who are on Medicaid today, Mr. President. But what we're doing, because we've got a view on an artificial deadline on July 4th that means nothing but another date and time, we could take the time to get this right if we lay down the House mark of the Medicaid bill and fix it. And I know that my friend and colleague from New Hampshire, I jumped in front of her, so I'm only going to take another minute or two. But, Mr. President, we owe it to the states to do the work to understand how these proposals affect them. How hard is that? I did it. How hard is it? How hard is it to sit down and ask the Medicaid office, ask the legislative staff, ask the Independent Hospital Association what the impact is? If there's no negative impact, what's wrong with daylight? What's wrong with actually understanding what this bill does? Mr. President, I know what it does because I spent a career implementing complex systems, and then I had the privilege of being Speaker of the House, and I implemented them in a government setting. And since I've been here, I've focused on bills and watched their implementation from the cradle until they're fully implemented. Mr. President, we owe it to the American people, and I owe it to the people of North Carolina to withhold my affirmative vote until it's demonstrated to me that we've done our homework. We're going to make sure that we fulfill the promise, and then I can feel good about a bill that I'm willing to vote for. But until that time, I will be withholding my vote.
This needs to be broadcast everywhere. Cut this up and put it into an ad. I saw a video from Senator Adam Schiff sharing this last night, and yeah, Democrats, share clips of Tom Tillis. I'm heading to the Capitol right now, and I am going to try to speak with him because I want to get as much on the record as possible. This is how we need to fight back. We are going to continue to do so on this show. If you want to support that, as always, you can hit that subscribe button, leave a like on this video, and if you stuck around at the end, drop a blue heart in the comments. And until next time, I'll see you soon.